Of Arsenal's 5 defeats last season, 2 of them belonged to Aston Villa. And pretty much the consensus of most people was that Arsenal's title challenge was derailed by those 2 defeats to Aston Villa. Win any one of those 2 matches, and Arsenal would have been Premier League champions. So Arsenal would have been forgiven for not having revenge on their minds, and Mikel Arteta made sure that he said that it wasn't a revenge mission when they went to Villa Park today to try and beat Aston Villa on what was going to be a very tough fixture. Think about it. Aston Villa last season were on a run when they beat Arsenal. They had won 15 straight home games, and when they ended both Arsenal's and Manchester City's records as far as beating them last season and en route to beating Arsenal at the Emirates, they qualified for the Champions League. So today's game was going to be a celebration of them getting into the Champions League, and it was going to be the first game at Villa Park, and it was going to be a very tough game for Arsenal. So when Mikel Arteta was going to line up against Unai Emery, everybody has been trying to draw parallels as far as their managerial acumen. Mikel Arteta has been number 2 in the league for the last 2 seasons, but a lot of people do tend to feel as though Emery is a better manager. Now, I'm not going to weigh in on that right now because I do think that there are variables that go into talking about situations like that, because Unai Emery has been managing for the better part of the last 16 or 17 years, and Mikel Arteta is only into his 6th full season of managing. So we will leave those comparisons for later on. But what we did find out was that Arsenal's resilience showed out today as they won 2-0 at a ground that has not been very kind to them over the last couple of seasons. Now, we all know that Arsenal's record at Villa Park is very good. It is their joint most winningest ground after, I think, Selhurst Park, where they have won 14 games each. Today took it to 15. So it was very important for Arsenal to put away the hoodoo that they have been having at Villa Park, and more importantly, to try and get past the psychological barrier that they had when they are facing Unai Emery and also facing Emi Martinez, who has been a very big thorn in Arsenal's back over the last couple of seasons since they sold him. So it was important to get that win today. One of the things that we were looking for was some kind of cohesion to see how Arsenal are going to respond to that big Villa crowd, and pretty much how players such as Martinelli and Partey are going to weigh in. Will Jurrien Timber have his long-awaited debut away from home? And he started. And then on top of that, we also wanted to see if Kai Havertz was going to be able to lead the line well. On the other side, Ollie Watkins, who has an imperious record against Arsenal. Is he going to be able to add on to the number of goals he scored against them? Other people such as Bailey, who have had tremendous games against Arsenal in the recent past, and whether or not Konsa and crew would be able to hold on and derail that Arsenal title charge. It didn't happen. It was an immensely intense game. It was a very fun watch, but it was an extremely tactical game as well. Arsenal were very good. They were on the front foot for the most part, but Villa were also very good, and they decided to be subdued. Now, you're going to have to ask each other whether or not it's going to be important for a team to be possession-based or a team that is going to decide to sit back and choose their moments. That is the question that we're going to answer in this video. But anyway, guys, it's your boy Izzy. And if you're new to the channel, please consider hitting that like and the subscribe button to let YouTube and everybody else know that you're enjoying this content. Thank you all for everybody who's been returning back to the channel. I promise I won't let you down. So the Villa Park game was going to be important for Arsenal to try and cast away the demons of last season. And I, for one, was holding on to very high hopes of the fact that we would be able to do it. Now, it's the second game of the season, trying to dust away the cobwebs of some players like Odegaard, who did not go into any international tournament, and for players such as Saka or Declan Rice, who had been in tournaments and went deep into them. Villa started the game brightly, and so did Arsenal. Both sides traded some blows in the beginning, and one thing that marked the game was that Arsenal were going to always hold on to possession. Now, depending on how you view it, you would think, well, Arsenal had the bulk of the possession, and so they were the better side. But on the other side, you have to ask yourself whether Villa did want the ball, or whether they ceded territory because they knew that Arsenal were going to hog the ball. And so it happened. Both sides seemed very comfortable with their game plan. Arsenal wanted to hold on to the ball, and Villa, on the other hand, wanted Arsenal to have the ball. And Villa did look the more menacing of the two sides. Over the course of the 90 minutes, Arsenal were okay, but Villa had what Arsenal had as their symptoms last season as to why they didn't win the game. And that was Villa had opportunities to nail Arsenal to the cross, but they weren't able to take those opportunities. Ollie Watkins most notably had two opportunities, the first of which was because of a Gabriel giveaway. And that is one of the few things that, as an Arsenal fan, I would have as a qualm with Gabriel, is that he tends to hold on to the ball a little bit longer than he should when it comes to defensive positions. Now, he was able to be closed down by the absolutely magnificent Morgan Rogers, who just was phenomenal for Aston Villa. And he closed him down, was able to steal the ball, square it off to Ollie Watkins, and he inexplicably put the ball wide. Now, that could have just been because today was a day that he was having as an off day. Ollie Watkins is usually a very lethal striker, and when he has the ability to run in behind, which is one of his biggest abilities as a striker, but Ollie Watkins spurned that chance, and it would come to bite them in the back. Villa did have good moments in this game. They were able to steal the ball away from Arsenal. They were extremely good in their pressing, very, very good in their counter pressing, but Arsenal were also very good in their pressing. It just seemed as though they were tactically canceling each other out in the first half. One did want to favor a possession-based game, and the other wanted to favor a subdued game to where they would try and pick their moments. It's easier to do that for Aston Villa because they, in theory, have slightly inferior players to what Arsenal were able to offer. The other thing that came out from that Gabriel chance that he gave away, because it's not the first time I've seen him do it, because he did something similar last season against Fulham, if you could remember. And Mitrovic was able, actually it was the season before, and Mitrovic was able to steal the ball, pounce on it, and he was punished then. So that is something that he might need to weed out of his game, something that he hasn't quite gotten fully out of his game. He does give you that one opportunity every once in a while. He does make a very good amount of challenges, and he does win a lot of his duels, but sometimes he tends to dwell on the ball too much. The rest of the first half was a back and forth, with Arsenal having most of the possession and Villa sitting back and trying to choose when they would attack. Now, the second half was where this game was won, quite literally. But it was won not because one side decided to do anything differently, but it was pretty much because Aston Villa decided to go more on the front foot, and that left Arsenal a few more opportunities to pounce on them. And Villa really should have gone ahead. When the David Raya save came to pass, with Ollie Watkins heading the ball just slightly to his side, some people would have thought that it should have been a 100% goal, but you can't really dictate for the fact that Ollie Watkins saw that Raya was already compromised from the earlier chance from Onana's shot that hit the post that was deflected. And he would have been forgiven to have thought that it would take Raya a while to react. But his world-class reaction to that was immense. And so when you see what he is able to do with the confidence that he now has with the backing of the fans and the manager, we are starting to see the best of David Raya. And this are the types of saves that you would expect a title-winning goalkeeper to make. So the game actually hinged on the next few minutes when, after Arsenal were able to bring on Trossard for Martinelli and Villa made their changes, Arsenal's change was much more lethal. And Trossard was able to get on the end of a bundled ball between Kai Havertz and Rogers, and he immediately, with his first touch of the ball, put the ball in the back of the net. A lot of people have been saying that Trossard is the best, most clinical finisher at Arsenal, and I'm starting to agree with them. The reason why I think that is because he doesn't need that many opportunities to be able to put the ball in the back of the net. And I know that there is the big elephant in the room, and that is the performance of Gabby Martinelli. Whether or not it is that Martinelli is having a down period, because most of last season he had an off season, and in the first couple of games, he has just not really looked like himself. Now, I'm going to come up with my explanation as to why I think Gabby is not being the player that we saw a couple of years ago when he scored 15 goals and was the toast of the town. Football these days seems to be overly coached, and this is something that I want to make a video about. Arsenal and Manchester City tend to play in this very stylish way, but it tends to be very robotic. And there doesn't seem to be much in the way of mavericks in the game these days. The type of people who, for example, decide to take the game by the scruff of their neck. We see it with Jack Grealish. Some of his struggles in Manchester City is because he tends to be a unique type of flair player. Coaches such as Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola tend to want their people to play strict positional football. And players such as Martinelli, who tend to be very direct and they tend to be more into trying to create a certain type of chance by using their own flair and their own instinct, tend to be limited by games such as those. And this is not a criticism of Pep Guardiola and Mikel Arteta, because we definitely can see from the fact that they finished first and second over the last couple of seasons that it is effective. But there are certain players that tend to be limited by those abilities. And I think that that's kind of what's happening to Gabby Martinelli. He seemed to have a lot more freedom in his season, the breakout season in the 22-23 season, than he does now. Another possible reason is that there is no established number 8. Arsenal's left-hand side is weak. It's been weak for a while with Zinchenko and the loss of Granit Xhaka. The other day I was talking about Liverpool not replacing Fabinho, but Arsenal have not replaced Granit Xhaka. They just haven't done that yet. They have tried with Kai Havertz, although he's a totally different type of player. And while I do believe that he could have some of those abilities, they need somebody with the football IQ of Granit Xhaka. And most of us who had denigrated him for years came to find out just how good of a footballer he was. And when he left, we can see the void that he left that has not been replaced yet. Add to that, Martinelli is struggling and there's no cohesion on Arsenal's left-hand side. That is hopefully going to be covered by the addition of Mikel Merino, who is coming in from Real Sociedad. He should be the person who might be able to link up play a little bit better with Martinelli. There's also something that I want to speak about Odegaard, who's looked very sharp, but at the same time, he seems to be linking up more with Saka than he does with Martinelli. And that creativity that he tends to offer more on the right-hand side is starting to impede the left-hand side. Arsenal tend to be very, very creative on that right-hand side, and we're not seeing the same type of bombarding fullback activity that we saw into the 22-23 season. So it's a lot harder for me to explain in this setting, and I probably will try and make a video on its own for that, but just food for thought that those might be some of the reasons why Martinelli is struggling. I don't think that he is a much less better footballer than he was a couple of years ago, though I don't think he has progressed in the same manner as a Saka or an Odegaard, or even in the short amount of time, Rice. But there seems to be something that's limiting him on that side. He just doesn't seem to be getting the same type of cohesion as Saka on the other side. Now, you can also say that, well, Trossard seems to be doing okay when he comes in, but Trossard tends to be a player who tries to drift in a lot more than Martinelli does. Martinelli tries to take on his player, and he tries to be a lot more incisive on that side. Trossard is a little bit more of a cohesion player. He tends to blend a little bit better with the other forwards that Arsenal have. And so that might be food for thought from Mikel Arteta, and I'm pretty sure he's going to find a way to try and combat that. But that is something that Arsenal is going to have to shake out of Martinelli's play. He doesn't seem to have the confidence or the fluidity that he had a couple of seasons ago. Beyond that, after Arsenal had scored that first goal, Aston Villa seemed as though they went flat. And it was no surprise that a few minutes later, about 10 minutes later, Arsenal were able to add a second. And this time it was more of a mistake from Emiliano Martinez in the Villa goal, because it seemed as though Partey had just let out a speculative shot and he kind of should have saved it. But I can't fault him because he probably seemed as though he was blocked a little bit. But it was strong enough to go in. And my unreserved, expletive-ridden commentary after that was indicative of an Arsenal team that had gotten over some of the demons of last season. Villa have been a thorn in Arsenal's side. You can think back to around the lockdown period when Villa did the double over Arsenal for the first time in a very long time. That was able to make them survive when they were still under Dean Smith. Arsenal have struggled against Villa. And while we can think back to the 4-2 where Jorginho gave us that wonderful moment, it was very important for them to win today, because in a game that was Villa's first home game, and in addition to that, a very, very tough game overall, because Villa are now a Champions League side, Arsenal needed to prove to themselves that they can go and put to rest those demons. Another thing that I really liked about this game is that Trossard seemed to make a case for himself. He didn't look happy when he scored. And I think that was a little bit of a message to Mikel Arteta of, I need you to trust me more. And now he's going to give him a selection headache for the game against Brighton, because when you really think about it, should he go on trying to give Martinelli the confidence that he needs and maybe to try and see if he can get that goal? Or should he reward Trossard, who has, for the last couple of games, and even towards the end of last season, if you think about the Man United game and you think about the Brighton game when he was able to score, he has come in clutch for Arsenal, and he has more than definitely earned his right into that first 11. Overall, I am extremely happy. Arsenal are laying to rest some of these demons over the last couple of years. When we beat Chelsea 5-0 last season, I felt as though that 6-0 Stamford Bridge game was put to bed. And while we still do have another game against Villa that I absolutely hope that we beat them in, this goes a long way to showing that Arsenal's title credentials are still valid and they are still going to kick into the rest of the season. It's not over yet. Arsenal still have Tottenham Hotspur after this, and they have Manchester City away from home. And not to mention Brighton next week, which is going to be a very tough game. We saw Brighton beat Manchester United today 2-1 in a tightly contested game that I think Brighton deserved, and they shaded over Manchester United. And so it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be an easy start for Arsenal. But if they're going to have to do it, they're going to have to do it the hard way. Last season, they managed to push City all the way. Let's see if they can do it this season. And according to most pundits, actually be able to try and take on Manchester City and take their title. But anyway, guys, so ends my rant. Arsenal win 2-0 at Villa Park. A wonderful game to watch. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments down below. As always, I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much. And it's your boy Izzy. Until next time, peace.